Hi, this is Epic Bill Bradley. I'm just giving an update on my recent attempt to swim Lake Tahoe. I had kind of toyed around with swimming it for a while, and I'd heard, as a kid, I'd heard about somebody that swam Lake Tahoe, and it's 21 and 3/4 miles across the lengthwise, and I thought it was impossible. So I'd always made this. Always in the back of my head, I'd always thought about that somebody had actually swam it. And then now that I'm into this endurance swimming, this marathon swimming, I've been kind of playing with it. Our original plan was maybe to try to do Tahoe before I went to the channel, but that didn't work out because the water was too cold. And so after I didn't make the English Channel, I talked to Mariko and my crew, and we decided to go for Tahoe afterwards. My buddy John had done the English Channel and Tahoe and the Catalina Channel all within 1 month apart, and I always got that logic where I think, hey, if John could do it, I could do it. So after I did the Channel, I said I'm going to go for Tahoe, and so we made our plans to head up there, and we went up with a bunch of my friends from my South End Rowing Club came with us, and then half our crew, and we headed up to try and swim it. And we started on the 8th at 7 o'clock at night. Very interesting, because you have to swim that lake, you have to get out before the wind kicks up in the afternoon, and it's really can be fierce. You could have 8-foot swells out there if you get out there in a windstorm in the middle. And so I didn't want any part of that. I already had that in the channel. So our plan was to start at 7 o'clock at night and swim all the way through the night and into the next day. And I made a mental note that I thought I've never swam any of my swims in less than 1.5 miles an hour. In fact, as I've been getting faster as I've been going along. And so I said, okay, 1.5 miles an hour is what I'm going to try. 16 hours. I said I'm going to swim for 16 hours. And I also learned from the channel that when they had put that sign up that said 4 miles to go on the boat, and then that storm hit, and I swam for an hour in the storm, and then you put a sign up that says 7 miles to go, I made a mental note like, that was kind of screwed up, man. It really messed with my brain. And so I don't want to do that ever again. And so I said, okay, I'm not going to ask anybody what the mileage is. I said, all I'm going to do is just swim per time. And so we started out, and I started swimming, and not too far into it, I actually, we made these potatoes in England where you grind them down really fine as one of my feeds, and I would put them in a baggie, and I would just squish it right down, and it would go down within like 45 seconds. I'd have it down, And so we did the same plan here, but we didn't have the same blender. We had a different blender. And I remember the first time I put that thing down my throat, all of a sudden it all just came right back up. It was too chunky. It was like, oh! And so I was already all wet. I'm off to a rough start. There's one throw up. So anyway, so I'd go, as we were going through the night, it hit like 1 in the morning, and I remember I started getting sleepy, kind of just out of it, man. And I was trying to get somebody to jump in on the boat to kind of keep me company and pace me a little bit, and they were too worried. It was so dark. It was really pitch right around this time, so I just kind of kept plugging along, but I ended up throwing up like 4 or 5 more times. I tried some of those, I tried some caffeine drink that just didn't agree with me. I tried it before in practice, but just not, when it gets so extreme, my stomach it's totally different than if you're on a short swim and you try something, than if you're into a swim like 8 or 9 hours and you try something that's totally different. So anyway, I ended up throwing up about 5 or 6 times, which I sure didn't help me. And then I remember I stayed to my mental note, and I swam all the way through that dark, and it was really, I just kept focused. And it's nice compared to the channel because there is some stuff you can see along the shore, some lights, and I just tried to make sure I was still moving. I go, that light's kind of moving from me, isn't it? And it was. I was kind of moving along, and then I remember at daybreak I kind of had like a little second wind, and I started, I felt good, and I swam till 15 hours, and they had pointed out to me. They said, the finish where we're finishing out is under this one peak, this mountain peak, And so I kind of, when I was looking at her, and I kept going, man, that thing is not getting closer. And I was swimming for a while. I go, it's not getting closer. And then finally at 15 hours, I said, all right, I'm going to ask how many miles to go, because that dang thing doesn't look like it's getting any further. But you know what's going to happen? I was thinking in my head is all of a sudden it's just going to be there. That's what I was thinking. I go, it's just going to be huge in there. And then I go, and I asked. I remember David was in the boat and in the kayak next to me, and I said, all right, I can't take it. How many miles? And he goes, 9. I go, 9? How's that even possible? How could I swim that slow? I could not believe I had 9 miles to go. I go, there's no way, but it looks like 9 miles. I go, how could that be? So I was swimming at like 3/4 of a mile an hour. The slowest I'd ever been was 1.5 miles an hour in any of these ocean swims or anything. And this was, I was swimming 3/4 of a mile an hour. There was 2 things I figured out later that I underestimated. One was, I wasn't recovered from the channel. I had gone out the day before and tried to swim 20 minutes, and it felt like I was pulling mud. You know, when I was pulling in the lake with that altitude, the altitude just really, really enhanced it. And I had done work with Alto Lab, which is an altitude simulator, and it's great. And I've done in other events, and it's worked great. And I know it's why I did as well as I did in this, because without it, I would have had a lot of problems. But anyway, so it was the altitude, and then I wasn't recovered, and you know, and then you throw in the fresh water on top of it, which you know, I swim in pools, and I swam a lot in a lake, in fact, earlier in the year. But towards the end, I was swimming all in salt water, all in the bay, all saltwater swims, cold saltwater swims. And I put on, like, I went up from, you know, my running weight is like, can be in the low 180s. And I went to 235. I thought, man, I'm not going to get cold in the channel. That's what I thought. I said, I'm not going to get cold. I go, I don't, you know, I remember I talked to my sister. I said, I'm 225. And she says, well, didn't you get cold when you're 222? Maybe you should go to 235. And I thought, no, I don't think that's a good idea, because I'm going to have to come down. But then subconsciously it stuck in there. So I ended up at 235. I kept eating. I couldn't help myself. And I was like, it wasn't that hard. And so I ended up at 235. And when I swam the channel, you know, saltwater buoyancy, I never got cold. I mean, just towards the end, I got a little bit cold. Everything went good. I swam fastest as I've ever swam over there. And then I came over here, and I'm like, in this salt water, I mean, in the fresh water, my weight, you know, that chub was just pulling me down. And so my feet were sinking. I was sinking. You know, I couldn't keep my feet up for nothing in the fresh water. So between the feet sinking, and I was just dragging myself for this whole time, and that's why my speed was so slow. But I remember Tom was on the boat, and we had 2 guys on the boat who've actually swam Tahoe, which gives you strength when you know that they're on the boat too. You know, who've done it. There's only been like, you know, 35 people who've ever done it, you know, ever. And I remember Tom, he was on the boat, and he said, and after I knew, you know, I knew I wasn't going to make it, and mentally, I had, like, in my mind was 16 hours, make it to 16 hours, make it to 16 hours, right? And so after that 15 hours, when they told me it was 9 to go, you know, I talked to Tom. He says, well, let's shoot for the land over there, right? I know a lot of people were looking at the GPS, and we made this right turn. He goes, you could make it over there. He goes, just make it to that land. And Tom is a really tough guy. And he goes, you just make it to that land over there. And it was like 2 miles, right? Well, I start swimming, and I swam for another hour. And I go, Tom, how far is it? He goes, it's like, it was 1.8. He goes, you're 1.3. I go, I'm 1.3. And I was like, I was so weak. I really had thoughts that I wondered if I could drown. Because I mean, I've never had this, you know, I'm getting pretty comfortable in the water. You know, I wasn't born swimming or anything, but, and I thought, and I was thinking, like, man, I wonder if I could throw up. And now, and I'm getting to where my arms, I literally can't lift them anymore. So literally, like, the last half hour, I was breaststroking. And then I remember I was sitting there, and I'd already thrown up like 5 or 6 times, which I'm sure weakened me too. And I just go, I could feel this big one coming up, and I was like, I like panicked, man. I think this one's gonna drown me. I think this one's gonna drown me. So I swam over to Mariko's on the kayak, and I just grabbed the kayak, the front of the kayak with both arms, and I just like, oh, I started throwing up all over my arms. I think she was looking at me all kind of shocked. I threw up all over my arms, and then I remember Tom came over with the big boat, and he looked at us, and he goes, "Hey, Bill, are you done?" And Marika goes, "Yeah, he's done, Tom." She wasn't gonna let me drown. Tom was gonna let me drown. He would have swam me till I drowned. He's one tough guy. So that kind of was it. So so on the positives of it, I did last 16 hours and 47 minutes, 23 seconds, but who's counting? No. And it was my furthest swim by 5 hours, and I swam it tired. I mean, I definitely swam it tired, and I was dragging my feet the whole way. So mentally, it was huge for me. I mean, it was a really huge accomplishment for me in my mind. Because I always thought in the channel, I wasn't sure if every time I made the channel, I mean, I got knocked out at 11:30, I've been knocked out at 11:45, but I'd never gone any further than this. And so I knew that the channel would take me 15, 16 hours to finish. The last 4 or 5 miles takes a while because you got a lot of current over there. And so I did get that. Now I know in the back of my mind, I know I can last 16 hours and 47 minutes. Not 1 second past what I lasted in Tahoe because I was going down. So I know I can last that long. But yeah, so in the food, it was kind of dicey on trying to figure out the food. I'd like to add one more thing on there. We did goos every half. We were rotating between goos and the potatoes. I'd like to have a third thing because once you start getting sick on something, it doesn't really taste that great afterwards. But I still think I think my food thing is in the ballpark. I think it's your body just gets so stressed that stuff happens. I got to be more careful with what I choose for the jolt with the caffeine. At 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Those are my when I started getting sleepy. The other lesson, I learned that. I was really super happy with my crew. I mean, everybody, not just Tom. I mean, there was nobody going to quit on me. Fact is, Tom told everybody before I got sick, he told everybody on the boat, and I didn't hear this.